Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the second Babble Ride Across Britain webinar. And this one is on the topic of training, a hot topic at this time of year for everyone. And as we'll go through on this webinar, we've got a big challenge ahead, but we've got a lot of people who can be taking this one on together. Few introductions and a bit of admin first. In terms of who we got on the call, my name is Nick. I'm the CEO at Threshold Sports. We've got Andy Cook, who is the route director, who has got more experience than anyone else about what it takes to actually train and prepare for this ride. We've also got Sophie Wood, or Woody, who heads up all our rider support function at Threshold Sports as well. So what we're going to do for the webinar is the same as usual. Any questions you've got throughout the course of the webinar, please chuck them into the chat. We'll either get to them as we go through or we'll get to them towards the end. And in terms of what we're going to cover, we'll go a little bit into the challenge itself, what it entails, and a recap on that, realize why the training is important. Woody's going to go through the training plans, where you can find them for those of you who may not have got your emails or anything like that. Going through milestones and terminology, so beginning to demystify some of those things in the training plans you may or may not be as familiar with, before going specifics of training, indoor riding, nutrition, hills, weather, and kind of finally a bit on mindset, which is pretty fundamental when you've got a challenge like this ahead of yourself. More time for questions at the end, but as I said, please drop in with questions as we go through. Okay, so first up, the challenge. 980 miles, 9 days, 3 countries, 23 counties, over 52,000 feet of elevation. Put simply, that is why training is important. We are not here to scare you about the challenge. We've actually got, the best part of 100 people signed up to this webinar who haven't actually signed up to the event for this year, but who are still considering it. The aim of this is not to scare you about the training that's required. The aim of this is to show how you can break it down, how you make it manageable, and how you prepare yourself to actually take part in the event come September. The thing which unites us all is this desire to get to John O'Groats, get there safely, and also get there smiling. And the more training you do, the more likely it is that you're going to enjoy the experience. And that is why we're here. It's one thing just to tick off a deeply kind of unpleasant, challenging thing where you're right on your physical limits. But the landscapes, the people, the experience all the way along for that 9 days, the more training you put in, the more you're going to be able to keep your head up and actually take in all those sights, the sounds, the smells, the experiences along the way. So like I said, the training is not just to reach the goal of getting to John O'Groats, it's to do it in a way which you look back and have all these incredible memories along the way. So the first thing, I'm going to hand over to Woody just to look at and explain where you can actually find all of the training plans.
Thanks, Taps. So all the essential information for the event will be hosted on the Rider Hub. There's a link to that from our website. There's a drop down under event information, and this is where all key information is hosted, including the training plans, which are now live. We had a couple of questions about which training plan to select based on your ability and experience with riding. So a couple of definitions to get you started and to choose a plan. So for the novice riders, this is recommended if you've never ridden 100 miles in one day. You might be new to the sport of cycling and have basic technique, but are looking for some more advice and support with skills and equipment choice in the training plan. Those that have completed cycling events before, but might find the thought of riding 100 miles a huge challenge. You might not have completed back-to-back events or necessarily ridden with groups or regular cycling clubs. So in which case, the intermediate plan will be the one for you. And then we have an advanced plan as well. So these are for those riders that regularly participate in sportives and multi-day events. You can ride 100 miles relatively comfortably, and you ride regularly with a group or club. You take part in cycling activities consistently throughout the year, then the advanced plan will be for you. Including the plan as well, we've got monthly focuses, so that just keeps you accountable for the key focus of that month. And Andy's written a short description to keep you focused for that month. And then at the bottom of the workout section, you'll find drills and other things to think about, which is a weekly breakdown so that you can keep focused each week. And then at the front page of the training plan, we have a key milestones document, which just outlines each month roughly where you should be, how many miles you're able to cover at that time. And Nick's going to go into that a bit more detail now.
Thanks, Woody. So key milestones. So this is something we introduced probably about 5 or 6 years ago. And the reasons for these, there's a few of them. One is that we accept that every single person on this call lives a different life. They're at different standards. They've got other things they need to do. It might be, you might be retired. You might have a really hectic job where you're traveling. You might have young kids, which restrict your ability to go out and do all the training that you might like. So the idea of us being able to create training plans which are suitable on a day-to-day basis for absolutely everybody is unrealistic. So based on feedback from people who are there going, I struggle to follow these training plans with those personal restrictions, we decided to set out a simplified set of milestones. And on the screen here, you can see how we break those down into January, February, March, right the way through to August. We think these were a really effective way of checking in on your progress, because it can feel a little bit overwhelming. But Andy, I think it'd be useful for you just to kind of go through the progression between these and why they're all important to hit.
Yeah, cheers, Tups. Excuse me. Thank you very much for that. And also welcome to everyone that's on the call. I think it was a really sensible introduction, the milestones, because as Tups has already said, it's very easy to think you're training. I mean, we've all been following what's been going on the forums and the comments that have been made. Lots of very, very positive comments from some people that have ridden previously. And the idea, as Tups has alluded to, was that these were all manageable milestones. But we're also, as Tups has said, very, very cognizant of the fact that people have got so many other things going on in their lives. So it is a guide, but it's a way of giving you some sort of focus and giving you the opportunity to just measure yourself, to see that you are up to scratch. And just to reiterate the other points that have been made already, we want you to come to this event and we want you to succeed. That's the most important thing. And we do not want people that are just completely ill prepared coming along. And I think a few people, I'm no climber. If I was going to go and climb, I don't know, Kilimanjaro or Everest, I'd certainly want to make sure that I was doing some training for that. So, what we've done here is put down some stepping stones that are effective ways of you measuring your performance and your progress through the year, and hopefully they're realistic. But at the same time, we know that people don't stick to it religiously, and they're a guide only, and that's the important thing. So, if you tick them off, fantastic. And if you maybe wait a month and it's all a little bit behind, then that's also fantastic. But it's a general guide to make sure that you're prepared and that when you get to the ride, you actually enjoy what you're doing.
Thanks, Andy. And I think a couple of things to pull out of here as well is training is not about doing the bits you find easy. So when we get into some of the specifics later on, you'll have bits which you're nervous about. And what we've picked out in the later months here are the things people often avoid, or they don't really want to do it, or they will try and find reasons why they don't go out on those certain days. So whether it be hills, weather, those kind of things. But by putting these in here, we know how important that is, even if it's just to get your head in the right mindset to be able to ride in the weather or ride on those hills. There's a reason behind every single one of these, which is based on the experience of Andy and the team in preparing people for this challenge. Andy, one question we got in advance was around that January piece of, what experience do you need to have at this point? One of the questions was, is it achievable to go from zero training now to RAB in September 2024? So kind of how would you summarize that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest hurdle that many of us face is, here we are sat around our computers and it's pitch black outside. So motivation is really tricky. And there's a couple of slides come up in a bit about indoor riding. So, going from nothing to achieving it, absolutely 100% it's possible to do that. But the key piece of advice I always give to people, and Tups, you've heard me say this hundreds of times, there's a very famous Italian cyclist who was asked what 3 pieces of advice he'd give to an aspiring cyclist. And number 1 was to ride a bike. Number 2 was to ride a bike. And number 3 was to ride a bike. So, if you can just get on your bikes and just ride at any time that you possibly can, however small that amount of time is, but to keep as many rides going and keep it as consistent, it's far better to do 5 1-hour rides a week than it is to do 1 5-hour ride a week. So the answer to the question is yes, it is possible to go from 0 to completing RAB. 100% it is.
Great. Thanks, Andy. So the next slide is going into some of the terminology on these training plans. So we've tried to make these as simple and comprehensible as possible, but there will still be things in here which people will want to know a little bit more about. So are you all right just to walk us through kind of cadence and tempo/threshold are probably 2 clear ones, which would be good to just explain in a bit more detail.
100%. So I think that, there's a sort of an old adage, some of us are old enough, where it was always no pain, no gain. And you see sort of people in the gym working as hard as they possibly can to sort of bash themselves all the time. The key to success for this challenge from day one on the actual event itself, but also in the training, is to ride at a consistent pace. So the intensity level that you're riding at needs to be an intensity that's comfortably hard and not hardly comfortable. You need to be able to ride 100 miles, breaking it down into 3 chunks each day. So it's 35 miles roughly, isn't it? And then get to your feed station, get yourself sorted and do another 35 miles. But if you go off like a bull in a china shop in the first 35 miles, or in the first couple of days in Cornwall, where it's ridiculously hilly, we've seen it time after time after time. People are then used up all of their energy and they then struggle for the end of the event. And you see it in one-day events as well. So those intensity levels are set for you to understand. And some people won't have power meters, some people won't have pulse monitors, but you can go by a level of exertion. And a general rule of thumb is the intensity level. If you can talk when you're riding, then that's a sort of a comfortably hard, not hardly comfortable level. So you don't need all the technology to know how hard you're riding. You'll know how long you can sustain that effort for. Cadence is the number of revolutions when you're pedaling, and it's generally perceived that it's far better to pedal a lighter gear and to spin more than it is to push a harder gear. Now, that's a general rule. It's like a lot of these training plans, they're general plans for lots of, to try and satisfy lots of different ability levels. Some people are just very strong riders and they will have a tendency to just push a big gear. But the general perceived idea from coaches is that if you're spinning a gear, you're using less glycogen. Glycogen's the carbohydrate you've got stored in your body. I'll talk a little bit more about that in the nutrition slides in a minute. But you need to be powering yourself with a mixture of fat as a fuel and glycogen as a fuel. So if you're spinning, you'll be using less glycogen, which you can use later on in the ride.
And just a quick one on that one on cadence, because I think when I did RAB, I remember starting the training, preparing, and to begin with, the levels of the cadence level seems very, very high if you're not used to riding at that level, but kind of gradually got closer to it. Never quite got to those levels because it didn't necessarily kind of suit my, probably more in the diesel engine category than some of the skinnier climbers, but it definitely was something where I felt progress in it. So I think that point around, like everything else, you train and prepare towards it. Don't expect to suddenly get to that level straight away. I definitely felt was kind of reassuring for me on that one.
That's so encouraging to hear. I mean, I think it's interesting. My own personal, I am fortunate enough to ride with power meters, and generally I struggle to reach sort of 80 revs a minute on average for a whole ride. But the point is that if it's a long ride, you're going to be riding up climbs much less than 80 revs a minute. But it's as I said, it's a general perceived idea that that's what you should be trying to achieve. So don't get hung up on it. Just see if you can get near it, as you've just described yourself.
And just on the cross training front, we had a couple of inquiries around integrating weight training into preparation for RAB. Any comments on that?
Yeah, weight training is a really interesting one, because there's lots of coaches that do absolutely advocate weight training, and there are, obviously the pure sprinters that are riding the velodromes. They need to build muscle mass, so they'll be doing big heavy weights. But the perceived wisdom from many sort of long-term coaches is that smaller repetitions, more repetitions but smaller weights is much better for endurance athletes. So it's about building your core. It's about an all-round exercise regime, strength and conditioning regime that means that you're going to hopefully not suffer from sort of sore joints, etc. And that will come, of course, with training as well, and the amount of hours spent in the saddle. But like all training, if it can be supplemented by a bit of cross training, then that's absolutely fine and a good thing to be doing, in my opinion.
Nice one. So next one is around indoor training. I mean, this is something when RAB started wasn't really on the radar at all. But I'll do a little bit of background around what we're doing as kind of the Babble Ride Across Britain around virtual training. So we see this as a great way of preparing people for the ride in two ways. One is the physical preparation, so integrating this into your training, but also some of the platforms out there at the moment allow you actually to prepare ride on the routes. You'll be riding on later in September next year, but also the group riding element. Sometimes you can feel like you're taking this on your own. On the live event, you're surrounded by all these other riders. It's super sociable. You get all that support. But sometimes it can feel like you're slugging away on your own in preparation for this. So we had a full virtual Babble Ride Across Britain prepped on a platform which politely informed us out of the blue that it would be folding the day after we launched it. We had planned to launch it. So we're now rebuilding the plan with Ruvi, who are a great platform, who give us loads of flexibility to integrate some of the things we really want to do. So this program will formally launch probably in the next month or so, with the main activity in the run up to Christmas in the new year. So we'll communicate exactly what goes into this. But as a platform, if you're looking to get into virtual training, there's lots of people on Zwift, and there's some RAB communities on Zwift as well, which is great to get involved with those. But also, if you're new to this, worth having a look at Ruvi, because already on there are some sections of the route which you can go and ride. So the ride up to Glen Shees, listed under the Cairnwell, you can try riding up Cheddar Gorge, and also the Lect, which is this kind of notorious moment on the ride. You can actually ride that on a turbo trainer at home, and it replicates the exact elevations and views of what you can expect in a full augmented reality version. So there's real value in virtual training. We're developing something with this specifically for RAB, which we'll be able to tell you about more soon. But Andy, I think it's worth, we don't have too much detail going into it on this point, but general, I guess, pros and cons and things to consider when you're looking into doing virtual training.
I mean, it goes without saying. I mean, virtual training is taken off obviously since COVID and lockdown, and it's the absolute boon. There's a world championship these days in virtual training, so esports generally. So the thing is that you can get much more bang for your buck, and it's much easier to control the training intensity when you're on a turbo trainer or a smart bike, whatever your weapon of choice is. So that's the first thing. Personally, I can't do it. I hate. For me, cycling's about being outside in the fresh air. So I think again, what that demonstrates is it's a balance. It's horses for courses. So if you've got the time and you prefer to be outside, then that's fine. It's true that the plans are really written. I've written the plans, aimed at being outside. However, as I've just said at the start of this little piece, that it is, you'll get more bang for your buck. So rather than doing, 3 hours of endurance riding to get the miles in, as we used to say, you can do an hour at a much more sort of intense level that's measured and get much more reward for it. So I think that it's got a massive part to play. The only downside, of course, is that you're not actually riding. So group rides are group rides, but you're obviously not sat. Someone's in their front room and you're in your front room. So there's no substitute for being out and understanding that the white line when it's rain is wet and slippery, or the wind's in front and it's blowing hard, etc. So or even riding physically with a group and someone coming closer to you or sheltering from behind them. So whilst it gives you a great opportunity to get fit very quickly, we get lots of very, very strong riders nowadays that come off the back of indoor training where they've got very, very limited bike handling skills. So just bear that in mind if this is your bag and you want to just train indoors. That's just I
think it's really valuable. And we've talked in the past about the combination of virtual riding is great, but then that joining a local club and things like that is a great way of countering some of that more isolated training in the winter time. So I think if you work on both of those and somewhere in the middle as well, getting out, that's a really good way of making sure you turn up well prepared for the event.
Sorry to interrupt, but I don't know whether you just saw someone on the chat has just put they're going to put the turbo in the shower as a good way of replicating. I thought that was quite amusing. Shared.
Okay, so I mean that segues very nicely into talking about training specificity, or to call it what it is, training in the things you don't like or potentially don't like. So this is, we alluded to it earlier, 9 days, it's a ride across Britain. It's not going to be Mallorcan sunshine and 22, 23 degrees and dry roads the entire time. It can be windy. It can be rainy. We've had years where it rains every single day, pretty much. We've had years where it's dry pretty much every day, and it will definitely be hilly. So this idea of training to the things you're nervous about, I always think is really, really fundamental. It's easy to avoid, but it's so important to get your head in the right place beforehand. But any kind of comments on this? We've had questions around how important is it to get hill training in? How much do you recommend? Andrew lives in Suffolk, pretty flat area. What's the best way to train for some of the bigger climbing days in an area without any taxing climb? So I wonder if you've got any, why don't we take hill climbing first, and then we can look at kind of weather conditions.
I think there's the first point I was going to make looking at this slide is it can actually be windy, rainy, and hilly all at the same time. So just bear that piece in mind. So I think you're absolutely spot on, Tups. I'm terrible if I'm getting ready for an event to just, if we do what we've always done, we get what we've always got, and it's very easy to avoid hills because you don't like hill climbing, for example, to not go out when it's wet and rainy, same with the wind. So it's absolutely vital that you do get yourself prepared, because we have had RABs which have been, I forget what year it was, 17 perhaps, where it pretty much was incessant rain almost every day. And that's a challenge in itself. So, to be prepared is vitally important. Going back to the specific question about hills, we joked in our prep that I was bound to say this, and I will say it. Back in the 70s or 80s, I can't remember which decade it was. There was a whole load of Dutch climbers that won the King of the Mountains jerseys in the Tour de France. Now, Holland's not renowned for being hilly, of course, so it's obviously that's a little bit flippant, and you do need to go and ride up climbs to just get the feel for what it's like riding on climbs. There's different ways to attack climbs. When we're in Cornwall and Devon, it's short, sharp, punchy stuff. It's relentless. It's up and down all day long. 10,000 feet of climbing on those 2 days. You've got to be prepared for that type of activity. Whereas once we get into Scotland, you just saw the pictures of the Lect a minute ago. They're just longer, steadier, perhaps less steep. Shap is similar. So different methods of climbing, whether it's a punchy, get out of the saddle, push a slightly harder gear, or whether it's sitting in the saddle, getting into a nice cadence and spinning up a climb. We're all different, as we keep saying. So some of you will be good at both. Some of you will be more prone to one of those ways of climbing. So I think climbing is important. It is important to go and try. However, as I said a minute ago, you don't need to necessarily go and climb all the time. It's about the intensity you're riding at. So there's plenty of intervals or short, sharp, hard sessions that you can bring in, which will improve your VO2 max, which will make sure that you're able to get the heart pumping and to be able to get up those climbs in as well as you might if you were just riding on climbs all the time.
There's a couple of things which just come in. One was around how you can simulate that on a gym bike. So there's elements of resistance, and you'll see this within platforms like Ruby or Zwift. They have hill training sessions where it replicates going up steep hills, where it becomes harder to spin those gears. So I think if you're on a gym bike or a spin bike, doing some lower cadence, higher power stuff will help prepare the muscles for that. I think the other thing, the photo on the right around it being hilly is a really important one to reassure people. Lots of people walk on this event at different stages, and there's absolutely no shame. There shouldn't be any stigma attached to that. In fact, I would always recommend, if you think you're going to be walking up hills, get some shoes, some cycling shoes which have a bit of grip on the bottom, so you can walk up those hills, maybe gravel biking shoes or mountain biking shoes, because the challenge is not to get from Land's End to John O'Groats without walking For some people, it might be. For the majority of it, it's just to get to Lansdowne John O'Groats. And, climbing up a section of the Lect rather than busting your legs to pieces. It's 5-10 minutes, maybe pushing along, chatting to somebody next to you, but then you get back on your bike and you finish it. So again, the hills piece, if you are really worried or concerned about some of the steeper ramps, they don't go on forever. You can walk it for a few minutes and then carry on after that.
Two things to add to. One is you don't get views unless you've gone up something. So that's the first thing. But secondly, that picture is really well chosen because look at the lovely smile on the guy's face. So I think that's a wonderful thing that you've said, and it's absolutely true. When we first started this challenge, I think there was an element of people that felt it was a performance challenge, but it's absolutely not that, as we've alluded to, and you'll have heard me talking about looking over the hedgerows and not looking at your Garmin and becoming a slave to the data. So you've got 12 hours each day to get from one stage start to the stage finish and make the most of it and enjoy it. And as I said earlier, if you ride at a steadier pace, then you can do that on a daily basis. If you blow your doors, as it were, in the first couple of days, then you'll be struggling for the rest of it and not enjoying it. So all good advice you're giving there.
Got a quick one here, which has just come in about recommended gearing. So we'll do a session. One of the webinar sessions will be around some of the more technical kind of bike setup if people want to know. But any quick points just to address that if people are going into their bike shop to get their bike set up or anything like that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the majority of bikes these days run what they call a compact chain set. So that's 2 chain rings at the front, and they're generally a 50 and a 34. And we've now got such a wide range of sprockets at the back. You can have 12 sprockets at the back. And so if you run a 34 chain ring at the front and a 34 sprocket at the back, that gives you basically 1-to-1 gearing. I won't get too nerdy on it, but it means that you can pretty much get up a brick wall on that. You can even go lower gearing than that, but actually I think that's plenty for most people. It's plenty, and plenty high enough gears for when you got the wind behind and you're speeding downhill as well.
Great, thanks Andy. And then just talking a bit about wind and rain, like I said, we're going to have all of this at some point. Any tips for either riding in the wind and rain, and then maybe just touching on kit as well?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the most important aspect of riding the wind, of course, and the wind, I think, is worse than riding the rain. Wind can just sap your strength 100%. But the whole idea of group riding is vitally important. You can save 30% of the effort if you're sat behind someone, sheltering behind them. Now, if you form nice little teams, which is why the chaperones are there to help sort of instigate those little groups and get the groups riding together. And of course, we can't do that right from the outset because. And we tried it a few years in the early days where we held up paddles with speeds that people were going to ride at. But the reality is people might think they can ride at 14 miles an hour, but suddenly it's Cornwall and it's much, much hillier. The point I'm making is that people are spread all over the place, but you do find yourself riding with similar ability riders pretty soon. And the idea would be to form little groups of sort of 6 to 8 riders. That's an ideal size group. No more. If it gets bigger than that, it's unruly. If it's smaller than that, you're doing too many turns on the front. And if you get a similar group of riders together, working together, sharing the pacemaking, it makes the whole thing so much, much more enjoyable. You're chatting away, and before you know it, you're at the pit stop, and you can just, and if you're having a rough time, you can sit at the back and let people know. Communication's key in that situation. So working together in small groups in the wind is vital, and understanding which side of the wheel to sit on, not getting too close, understanding the ability level of the riders. That's why group riding, practicing group riding with clubs or groups in the lead up is such a bonus for this. Touching on kit, I've invested in a good rain jacket for sure. It is Great Britain. As Tubbs has alluded to, we are going to get rain. I said, I think 17, we had rain every day. Good quality equipment. We got massive drying rooms back at base camp, so you can get all your kit dried again. Laundries every third night, I think it is. I can't quite remember. But invest in good kit. Don't scrimp on your kit, but don't expect it to be 100% waterproof. Nothing is. You just look at those pictures. There's a big hole between the neck and the top of that jersey. The stuff, your shoes never stay completely dry. Just be warm. Layers is vitally important. So good quality cycling clothing from reputable manufacturers, with a good rain jacket. And as is shown in these pictures, there's a very strong tendency to go for black colors. I don't know why that's happened over these last few years, but that's all good fluorescent and light colors. I would always advocate that you can be seen. So lights as well on your bike when it's miserable conditions.
Nice one. Thanks, Andy. Something which counters the bad weather, food, fairly fundamental bedrock of the event. So just talking about nutrition, we talked a bit in the last webinar. We'll talk again on another one in a bit more detail around nutrition. But as a recap, on the bike, we've got sports nutrition provided by High Five. So that is your electrolyte drinks. We have recovery protein drinks in the base camp. We've also got gels on the route as well. So we've got everything you need from the kind of electrolyte drinks and recovery shakes element. But also alongside that, we've got all our pit stop food, which is your more traditional food, ranging from crisps to sandwiches to pork pies to chocolate to cereal bars and all those kind of things. So those two things together provide basically everything we need. And then we have big breakfasts and afternoon tea and big dinners in the base camp. I think the point around training around here is just getting your body used to it. So sometimes we've had some moments where we'll have someone come along to the first day or two of RAB that have never used gels or anything before, and you'll see them squeezing 7 or 8 of them into their water bottle. They're kind of rubbing them all over themselves, just shoving them everywhere they can to try and keep going. And sure enough, within 24 hours, they've got a dodgy stomach because their body's never been used to that kind of influx of kind of nutrition. So the preparation and nutrition is as much part of your preparation and training as it is time on the bike. So working out what you need and that energy intake, and I might hand over to you, Andy, to give a bit of an idea of almost the amounts and how you would eat while you're actually on the bike. But the idea of preparing for what you're going to do on the live event is so important, because you want to change as few things as possible when you actually get onto the live event.
Yeah, thanks, Tubbs. I mean, I think the most important thing to bear in mind is it comes back once again to the intensity level that you're riding at. Because we've all got about 2 to 2.5 hours worth of glycogen stored in our liver and our muscles. No one's got any more than that. Not Chris Froome, not Laura Kenny. And once you've used that up, then you would only be powering your body with fat. Now, we've all got plenty of fat on our bodies. Even the skinniest athletes apparently could exercise for 6 hours, according to the sports physiologist, without eating anything. 6 hours, 6 days, sorry, which is ridiculous. What would stop you, of course, is your brain. The point I'm trying to make is that you need to continue to put calories back into your body, and you need to think about how many calories you're burning. And the majority of people on this will be burning 6,000 calories on average a day. That's a hell of a lot if you add on your actual normal daily living calorific intake as well that's required. So you need to take that on, but you need to take it on a little bit like the sustainable and consistent approach to expending the energy. You need to do the same taking on. Tups just spoke about the guy who put all the gels into his. Your stomach cannot cope with that. You cannot actually absorb more than about 100 grams. The pros at the moment are taking about 100 to 115 grams of carbohydrate an hour. So, if you want to get really technical, you can start measuring out how much you're taking in a water bottle with the powders, how many gels you're taking. But also, don't ever underestimate real food. Not everybody likes sports nutrition, and it doesn't always agree with everybody. So, a cheese and ham sandwich at the end of the day, for example, is an absolute perfect balance of carbohydrate and protein to recover the muscles. So, what suits you. Tups' advice on practicing before you get to it, not just the cycling and getting your body fit, but also making sure what works for you in terms of eating is vitally important. And on that note, of course, there's all the different dietary requirements are taken care of splendidly by Threshold Sports, be it at pit stops or at the feed stations.
I think one just to add, it's just reminded me of stuff from various years when we've done this is, so we've got, a luggage allowance where that is enough to carry all the stuff you need, regardless of size. If you're 6'2", 6'3", you'll still be able to fit all your stuff in there. But then we've also introduced this additional luggage allowance if you are someone who wants to bring a bit more, and that might be extra pillows, this idea of working on the things which you really require to get through this. We had one guy who had the extra luggage allowance, and he confessed he bought 6 bottles of elderflower cordial, kind of glass kind of bottles of elderflower cordial because that was his thing. He really liked it. That's what he'd been training on, and he gradually worked his way through it. His bag got lighter each time he took it to the luggage truck at the end. That's absolutely fine. You know, he's identified that that is an important thing, whether physiologically or emotionally, to have some elderflower cordial in his bottle all the way through. That's great. If you really like one type of sports nutrition, or you really want to have something which you have every day on your kind of low point, that's absolutely fine. You don't have to do it in a very, very specific way. We are there to cater for as many people as possible. But it's around refining and working out what's going to get you through those days, through those difficult bits. We definitely don't have any shortage of food, and there's a huge range. Anyone, you know, ask anyone on the forums or anything like that what it's like at the pit stops and the food. So we don't suggest bringing stuff on if you're worried about getting hungry. But if there's anything really kind of specific or quite niche, then, you know, we've had that before, and those people get through. That all helps. There is one question which I wasn't quite sure where it would go in this, but someone's asked about a kind of a sleeping strategy, which kind of links to recovery. As much as you can is probably. I'm not sure this is really reflected training or the live event. I mean, you talk to most trainers and they say one of the things people neglect is the actual sleep and recovery. That's the bit where your body repairs itself. So you'll be doing big blocks of training. If you follow this training plan, you will likely be more tired than you've done before. You'll be getting fitter and fitter, but you have to prioritize that rest and recovery piece as well. Otherwise, you'll start kind of getting towards that burnout point. I mean, Andy, you always say it's better if you're feeling exhausted, overtrained, overtired, it's better to actually miss a training session rather than try and push through. But trying to balance that recovery piece while you're training, I think is really, really important.
I think you've made a really strong point there. I think it's each of us knows when we're trying to skive off or whether we really are overtired, and that's the important thing. It's easy to sort of miss a session because you think you're tired, but it's absolutely vital that you get the rest and recovery, as you pointed out. There's a general rule of thumb that you work in 4-week blocks, so the training gets progressively harder, either intensity or volume. You know, from week one to week 2 to then week 3, and then you just ease back a little bit on week 4 so that your body can adapt to the training load that it's just been put under, and then you increase a little bit more. So it's like a stepping stone all the way up, and that's kind of what the basis of the training plans is written on. But absolutely rest and recovery. And the other thing, of course, is that, you know, you're not going to be sleeping in your bed. And I know from reading the forums in the past, people that have never been camping before actually go and practice camping. And that's not such a daft thing to suggest, because, you know, rolling your bedding out and I know even the tent's put up for you, it's still a different regime, and you need to be able to get your sleep and your recovery. Definitely.
Yeah. There's one question which just popped in from Gillian. Advice around minor injuries might be picked up during training, niggles with knees or hips, best to carry on, reduce training load or stop. It's kind of a difficult one. It's very specific to the individual. I don't know, Andy, if you've got any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, if it depends what the niggle is. I think you shouldn't allow it to. Only you will know. And I think that, you know, go in to see a physio as soon as you can if you've got a little twinge, or getting a bike fit. Bike fit is absolutely important. I'm a complete convert. You know, I've been a coach and a cyclist all my life. And I had a bike fit fairly recently, and I wasn't miles out, but it showed I had a leg that was 9 millimeters longer than the other one, which I'd never known, and here I am 60 years old, and it was just mind-blowing, the changes that it made and the difference it made. So, you know, I'm a strong advocate, and that was from a physio who does bike fitting. So I'm a strong advocate now, funnily enough, of going and get a bike fit, getting yourself looked at. And it's absolutely right. If you've got any issues with, you know, teeth or anything that you need to get sorted, try and get that sorted sooner rather than later, so that it doesn't impair your training later on in the year. So, you know, any minor thing that you need to get sort of looked at, go and look at it as soon as you possibly can. But physios, bike fits, you know, whatever, get it done. Yeah.
So just got a couple more, and then any other questions to come through. So this one kind of comes up quite a lot. You know, could spend a whole webinar talking about this, and it'd be fascinating to do so. But Andy, a bit just on mindset, and how you can kind of best prepare people to take on this challenge.
Yeah, I mean, it's people will be doing it for different reasons. There'll be people doing it for charities, and that's a great motivator in its own right. People will do it for their own personal well-being. You've talked about the camaraderie and the friendship, and I mean, I think that picture on the left is wonderful because it kind of demonstrates, a real mix of people there. There's a chaperone riding along. There's someone with their feet off the pedals, just obviously having a great time I know exactly where that picture's taken, alongside the River Wye, and you can see the people behind are just, if you can get your mind set on what the challenge is, and not to become anxious about it. That's the key thing for me, is taking the anxiety away from it. And I think that there were events that I've been to, no names, no pack drill, where the organisers are hollering for people to get ready and shouting and I think that the thing about the Threshold Ride Across Britain is that it's just got a very relaxed but highly high standard of delivery. But if somehow we've got this balance right, and I think that that's the thing that makes it so important. But that's, when you talk about the mindset, that's part of that. That's part of being ready to take on 100 miles each day for 9 days. And there was, most people that have got an engine, they've done some sort of endurance sport, be it running, swimming, rowing, perhaps. Most people would be able to complete this with little training or limited training, perhaps. But as we said at the start, if you've trained and you know that you're in the right shape, not just physically, but with your mind as well, and you haven't got any worries, and you can just go out there and you can talk, if you do get any anxiety during the ride, to other riders, to the chaperones, to the staff, to get anything that's worrying you or causing you any problems, out and sorted before it becomes too much of a hindrance for you to carry on with the ride. So a positive attitude, knowing that you're going to get from London to John O'Groats is as much a part of the training as actually the physical training, for me, for sure.
Yeah, I think something certainly my kind of experience of working is the visualization piece. So we talked about those milestones, and there's elements in there around what to expect. So to expect some of these challenges along the way, to kind of come to terms with that now, to prepare for it. So when it is rainy, you're like, yeah, this was expected to happen. It's nothing out of the ordinary. When it's windy, you're not there going, God, this is impossible. It's made it so much harder. You're going, well, we knew it'd be windy some days, so this is all part of it. When you hit the hills, you're not surprised by it. You've been there thinking, okay, yeah, I'm going to have these big days. I know I've got to take it slowly. So that visualization, which can start now, So when you get to the event, and hopefully things like the virtual training platforms will all help this, you're mentally prepared for it, and it's not seen as a surprise. So yeah, that visualization and the positivity thing, I think, go really hand in hand. And we've seen people embrace those hard days, embrace those tough bits, and come out absolutely buzzing because they prepared for it and overcome it. So yeah, a huge amount in here. Like I said, we could spend ages talking about it. One question actually just came in earlier was just around someone who's, it's pretty amazing. Says, Mike, did the route with you 10 years ago, brutal but great. I was 66 then, and I fancy doing it next year the other way around. I'll be 77 then. Is there an age limit on elating? Any suggestions for a senior rider? So asking a young rider like yourself, Andy, any particular thoughts on that?
I regularly ride with a 76-year-old guy who would be he would manage this challenge. I'm certain. I ride with plenty of octogenarians as well. There's people that are still racing at that age. The difference, of course, is the time it takes to recover. So you need to, if you're an older rider, you do need to bear that in mind with the training as much as the actual ride itself. But as we've said right the way through this, if you've trained properly, I don't see any reason why it shouldn't be possible. I think that you need to ride even more within yourself, if that makes sense, and not get carried away with the young guns and go chasing after them. So it's as much about what's in your head and the positive attitude we just talked about as anything else. But yeah, the big difference between riders of a more senior age is that the recovery time takes so much more longer. So that's the big thing to bear in mind in the training.
Great. Thanks, Andy. And I think it's the final point before we go on to any other questions in the chat or anything like that, was just reinforcing this point that Babble Ride Across Britain is an achievable adventure. It's been designed, and Threshold's whole setup and purpose as a business is to make something which seems impossible or beyond reach, make that possible. So we've seen since 2010 people of all shapes, sizes, ages, backgrounds, physical ability come along and take this challenge. And I think particularly if you're on this webinar now, then you're already in the right mindset to prepare for this and put the time and effort in. So we kind of alluded at the beginning, the training plans are there to support you, not to scare you. The community, the forums, you can pick the phone up to us to chat through things. We are here to reassure you and support you to get in the best possible shape for that live event. We've done this ride with thousands and thousands of people. You can never call it on the start line about who's going to find it easy, who's going to find it hard. But what you do find out is those people who are smiling kind of midway through the ride, the one thing they have in common is they've put the effort in, they've put the time in, they've taken it seriously, and they're the ones enjoying it all the way through. So hopefully this session has been helpful in terms of giving a few pointers, bit of guidance around the training plans. But they are there for you. And we just want everyone to get there and have a great time along the way. I'm going to have a look if we've got more questions coming through. We'll try and get through as many of these we can in the next kind of 10, 15 minutes. So if I work backwards, we've got people coming back to vanquish the lect. So some unfinished business on that one for some people. There's a question, Woody, this is probably from you, from Jules, just getting directions to the forums.
Yeah, so there's a link to the forum on the RAB hub, which is on the website. Just there's a drop down that's named event info. Then you'll find the RAB hub, and at the bottom of that, there's a link to the rider forums. Equally, you can just Google Ride Across Britain rider forum, and it'll pop up. Okay,
great. And there's another question just about accessing the training plans again. I think people might have come in a little bit later, so just recapping where you can get that.
Yeah, so that's also on the Rider Hub. So if you go to the Ride Across Britain website, there's an event info section on the website, and that pulls down a drop down, and then you'll see the Rider Hub. It hosts all key event information. So also this Friday, we'll be launching the transport and extra weight booking. Again, that will be hosted on there. Kit lists, Strava groups, etc. Everything's on the Rider Hub.
Thanks, Woody. I've also got one here. So this is from Nige Waddington, which is asking around total elevation gain over the course of the ride. So I've got to remember to the first slide, but I think it was about 52,000 feet.
52.
But unevenly spread throughout the ride. So the best thing to do is to look at on the main Ride Across Britain website. Within there, you can see breakdowns of each stage, what you can expect, a basic kind of difficulty rating, profiles, but you can also click through and zoom in and see a full kind of GPX detailed route breakdown of all of those different stages. So if you want to know a little bit more about the route, that's your best stop there. Looking at other questions here. So there's one around sizes of group cycling. So Andy, you talked about different sizes of groups. This is always a bit of a challenge on the ride, I'd say, to try and manage these into different groups. So any thoughts, both in training and actually on the live event as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I said, the ideal size is sort of 6 to 8. If you get 6 to 8 similar ability riders, that's kind of the optimum, I would argue. However, if it gets bigger, you end up with different abilities there, and it starts to stretch out, and people push too hard. There's something called half wheeling, and if you're riding next to someone, which you're entitled to do in the UK, if you're riding next to someone two abreast, and then that person starts to push a little bit harder, the person on the other side then tries to keep up. Before you know it, it's a full-on race, and the people behind are all just getting blown to pieces. So the key to good group riding is riding at that intensity level I keep banging on about, which you're comfortable with, and if the riders are a similar ability, you're all sharing that effort together. So that's key. What happens then, of course, is that you'll catch a slower group up potentially, and then they jump on the back, and then that group just swells So the key thing there is for people to take the initiative when the group starts to get bigger than, maybe 10 or 12, and allow a gap. And the reason we do that is because safety on the road, and to make sure that traffic has got a chance to come past and that you can communicate. Inevitably, though, of course, we're all competitive beasts, and that's when it tends to go a little bit awry, because people start trying to keep up with the riders just gone past, and before you know it, you can easily become a big ragtag bag of sort of 20, 25 riders all trying to sort of race each other down the road, and it doesn't look quite so good. And obviously the reputation of the ride and safety of the ride is what's important to us. So that's why I always say 6 to 8 riders is an ideal number.
Great. Thanks, Andy. And we've got a few kind of more administrative quick ones here. Actually, it looks like we're picking them up, but we can share them in the group. Charging facilities at Basecamp. Again, we'll do other webinars where we go right into Basecamp life in more detail, but there's charging points for Garmin's, mobile phones. We kind of suggest you don't bring any more electronic devices than you need, because it's not really about that. But yeah, we've got all that stuff in Basecamp for you to be able to charge those as you go through. There's a couple of things, just admin around not receiving emails and things like that. So the best thing to do is if you email in, it'll come through to Woody's team at info@rideacrossbritain.com, and we can double check email addresses, and often they may end up in a junk filter or something like that. So just needs adding to kind of safe sender lists and things like that. We've got one around the bugs in Scotland and midges. This is a question about hotels and camping. The midges, again, the years we've done this, there's always one pit stop 1 on day 9, which is the kind of epicenter of Scottish midges. And they eat you at that pit stop rather than you eat the pit stop food. But in my experience, that's the only consistent place where we really have midges, and that's a really limited stop. Like on the bike, they're not really an issue because you're cruising along. And in base camps, we've had, famous last words now, touch wood, we've had limited issues with them. So we suggest packing a midge net, but it's rare that you see anyone wear them on the event. Would you say that's a fair summary, Andy?
Yeah, 100% I would. The only time we did get them on a base camp was when we did the route a different way. We were under Ben Nevis, but I don't think I recall them on any base camp. But you're absolutely right. Altnahara is quite an interesting place to stop. However, it suits everybody because it's the last day and people don't want to hang around. They want to get to the finish. So people go in, get themselves sorted, and they're away pretty quickly from that base camp. From that pit stop.
So to be clear, we have now ensured that every single Scottish base camp will be covered in midges after saying this on this webinar. And there's another person here just asking around kind of taps running water at base camps. The base camps have a huge amount of infrastructure there, running drinking water, warm water, showers, bottle cleaning facilities, bike cleaning facilities. So there's a lot of stuff there. But if you've got any really specific one, there might be nutritional concerns, there might be medical concerns, there might be accessibility concerns on the event or anything like that, please do drop a line in. We'll try and get back to you as quickly as possible. It's usually a pretty quick turnaround. But if not, just ping us another note and we will get on it as quickly as we can. I'm looking at other questions. Please feel free if there's any more which people want to drop into the chat. Otherwise, I think we've got through the majority of these ones already. So yeah, I think we should probably wrap it up there for this webinar. Oh, hold on. We've got one, Graham sneaking one in at the last minute. Milestones, on the intermediate milestones, it has a 100-mile ride in February and March, but can't see them on the monthly plans. So I think this is probably looking at the difference where we tend to use time on the training plans and then put in some distance markers on the milestones. So Andy, do you want to just give a bit of a heads up about why we do it that way around?
100%. It's an interesting one. I've always worked on miles personally and gone out and, my target was 50 miles this day or 100 miles that day. But I then, bizarrely, I can remember when I was racing at a fairly high level, that people suddenly started using time. And it makes more sense to use time because we've got so many different ability levels. So it's somebody trying to do 50 miles, if we were as prescriptive as that, might take them 4 or 5 hours because that's how long it would take them. Whereas someone else doing 50 miles might take them 2.5, 3 hours. So it's quite important, I think, that you ride to the time and then progress the time rather than progress, because you will ultimately progress the miles at the same time, if that makes sense. So that's why we do it that way, so that people are increasing the time and obviously increasing the distance by getting fitter. That's the idea, plan.
Yeah.
Of course.
Okay, so can't see any more questions coming in unless we get a last little one sneaking in. But just to wrap up, just want to say thanks, Andy. Thanks, Woody. And thanks everyone who's dialed into this. Really good numbers to see lots of people on this. It's a good sign for us that it's going to be a good RAB because people are taking this stuff seriously. We'll post the videos on this as well. So if you've got friends or people who are signed up but couldn't make it, we'll send this round so people can read it afterwards. But also for those people who may be on the fence about signing up, we are down to our kind of last plus packages now, and we are running low on the classic packages as well. So if you're looking to give yourself an early Christmas present, to give you something to focus for next year, now is the time to be getting stuck in and getting yourself on the signed up rider list for next year. It's going to be a good one. Okay, thanks guys. Good to see everyone.
Thank you.